Welcome to Rewind, Rewatch. I'm Andrene.
I'm Joel.
And we're siblings, or I like to say sibs. We're sibs. Joel, do you like that?
What? No, I don't like that. Why can't we just say the word?
Because I like to breathe. Okay, so we're sibs who will be rewatching 90s movies and basically trying to compare them to today's world to see whether or not they're still good. Were they never really good and we just didn't realize it because we were little kids? Are they still amazing? Do they stay up to today's standards? And basically, how rewatchable are they? And so this week, we're discussing The Fugitive. It is a 1993 film from the Warner Brothers. It's about 2 hours and 1 minute, and it's a PG-13 rating.
It's funny because I feel like action movies from the 90s were always like super long. So when I first pulled it up, I was like scared because I'm like, this is going to be like a 2.5 hour movie.
Yep.
But it was only 2 hours. It was like 2 hours, like right on the dot. It was a little on the long side, but it wasn't too long where you felt like, oh God, this is long. Like it was just the right amount of time.
I mean, I'll be honest. I actually broke it up. I watched half in one sitting and then took a break and watched the second half.
Okay.
It was a little long for me, but all that to say,
well, what's like the ideal like movie length?
An hour and a half.
90 minutes?
Hour and a half. For like a good strong movie where I'm into the storyline. I want to see it like you can flesh things out. You can really develop your characters. Because I think like if you're hitting like an hour, it's like, what are we doing? That's an episode. That's a TV show.
Yeah.
You know, so I need a little bit more than an hour. Hour and a half is a nice sweet spot. I think once you start hitting 2, it's like you really got to be giving me something where I'm just like, oh, the 2 hours was worth it.
Don't let Scorsese hear this.
Well, you know.
You know he doesn't have any movies that are shorter than 3 hours long.
Well, yeah. What was it, The Irishman or something?
I mean,
I never even finished that thing, to be quite honest.
It was too long.
And I love his work, but anyway.
Yeah.
So all that to say, The Fugitive, I believe, was your pick this week. So
it was.
Why did you pick this film?
I mean, I feel like The Fugitive, I was thinking about movies that we could watch that were 90s films. I feel like the 90s were very big on action films. The 80s too.
Yeah.
But when I think about 90s action films, I feel like The Fugitive always comes to mind. Like, I feel like it was like one of those big movies. Mel Gibson was not Mel Gibson's not in this movie.
That's Braveheart.
Braveheart is a big movie too, but Harrison Ford was a big action movie star at the time. Tommy Lee Jones is in this movie as well.
Yeah.
Who was also very popular at the time. He was great in this film. We'll get more into Tommy Lee. But yeah, I feel like The Fugitive was one of those big movies. And I also feel like when I was a kid, this was a movie that I remember like being on and around at the time.
Yeah.
1993, I was born in 86. So in 93, I was 7. So like, this was not an appropriate movie for me to be watching at the time. But I do remember like my parents and like older family members watching it. And I remember it being around and being like fairly popular. There was a lot of commercials for it.
Yeah.
And I feel like this was one of those movies that I was like sneaking down the stairs to watch. I feel like we were at our grandfather's house. Do you remember this?
Yeah. So, well, I'm thinking it may have been Air Force One.
Okay.
But it very well possibly could have been.
It's Harrison Ford. It's
it's
hard
one
to
of those,
tell.
He's running away or running towards something.
Running away or towards something.
Yes. I remember the poster of him, like the freeze frame of him running like in a tunnel in The Fugitive.
He's running in a tunnel in this movie.
That's what I see. Is like I see him like running away because it's fugitive, so it's away from something. But yeah, I think we may have seen snippets as kids, peeking through the stairwell. But
so what I remember is being in Florida at our grandfather's house, and we had been sent to bed, and the adults were up watching some movie, and I remember us like tiptoeing to get to the stairs to like kind of watch and see what the adults were watching.
I probably started that.
It was 100% your idea because I would have just stayed in bed. So I was a goody two shoes.
Yeah, you were a goody two shoes.
And then I do remember like we didn't know what was going on because at this point, whatever movie we were watching, number one, we were like 7 and 9. And also we had missed the first hour of the movie.
Yeah.
And I just remember like somebody was cussing or somebody said the F word, and I was just like, oh my God.
That's why I feel like it was Air Force One. I don't know.
I don't like because my core memory is like I don't remember ever hearing somebody cuss in a movie before because I never watched a movie with cussing.
Yeah,
and I definitely never heard anybody say the F word.
Yeah, we were big Disney fans.
Like, but I knew what the F word was. I must have heard it somewhere, but I never seen it in a movie. I was like, oh wow, like
this is for adults.
So maybe it was Air Force One because I don't remember any F-bombs in the Fugitive.
I think it was Air Force One, man. Because there was a lot of fighting going on, and there was like gunshots. Well, there's gunshots here too, but for some reason, in my core memory, I'm thinking Air Force One. So shout out to that movie, I guess.
It might have been.
But either way, so you're thinking about us being kids and sneaking in to watch it, and this is one of the big Harrison Ford movies at the time.
So what we do is we always talk about the movie, and we always try to summarize it in one sentence.
Okay.
And so since I picked this movie,
we'll give you the shot.
No, that's not what we were going to do. That's the opposite of what we were going to do. Because I feel like I did it last week when we did Batman Returns.
I think we both did. I think we both gave it. Because remember I said the whole thing about Catwoman being there and then you left.
All right.
But I mean, it's fine. I can go.
Yeah, go.
That's fine.
So the idea is summarize this movie in one sentence.
Okay. A vascular surgeon.
Wait a second. Before you finish. You 100% had this like locked and loaded because a vascular surgeon is not something that would have just come to mind.
That's what he was in the film.
That is true.
That stuck out in my mind.
Was.
He was a vascular surgeon.
Okay.
So I'm trying to describe the main character.
I just had to get that out, but I'm going to let you finish.
Okay.
One sentence summary. Go ahead.
A vascular surgeon wrongfully convicted of murdering his wife escapes from custody in order to clear his name.
That's pretty good.
Why, thank you.
That's exactly what this movie is about. Harrison Ford plays Dr. Richard Kimble. And what we see at the beginning of the film is that his wife is being murdered. They're purposefully unclear about showing who the killer is because there's a question about whether or not he killed his own wife, whether or not someone else killed her. Who is this person that killed her?
A one-armed man.
Dr. Richard Kimble is also a surgeon. So he's a very smart man. He's a doctor. He works in medicine. And his
That's
wife
what doctors do.
Has been murdered. And he is promptly, within the first 10 or 15 minutes of the film, I don't even think they finished with the opening credits, he's convicted as the murderer because basically when she was getting murdered, she calls 911. She says that the murderer is still in the house, and she's calling Richard, which is his name. Richard, he's still here. He tried to kill me. So, of course, they use this and 911 call as evidence to show that he was the one that killed her, that she was calling the cops to convict and to accuse her husband of murdering her.
Well, there's also more to it than that, right? Because they also found his prints on the gun, on the bullets, because apparently she was shot and her skull was bashed in with some object. So they find his prints everywhere, but again, it's like, I mean, it's his house. But I mean, the gun and the bullets, okay. They also, there's no sign of a break-in. That's a really big part of it, because it's like, so if someone came in and did this to his wife while he was allegedly in surgery or not there, how did they get into the house?
But from the beginning, and I mean, this is not new, I guess, but he is adamant that he did not kill his wife. He's apoplectic at the fact that his wife was murdered.
Yes.
And he's also befuddled and shocked when they initially try to accuse him. He's like, do you really think that I would have done this? That I killed my wife? Is that what you're doing? You're accusing me?
Yeah, he couldn't believe. And the whole time that they're questioning him, all I keep thinking is like, why doesn't he have a lawyer? Like, I just kept...
That was odd, because it's like, why are you talking to the police without a lawyer present?
But a lot of people do, because they're like, I'm a witness. Think about it. It's like, you witness this crime, you come in, and they just talk to the cops. People don't even think that I might need someone to assist me. But yeah, the entire time, the cops basically are like, this is the guy who did it. We know he did it. And I was very surprised to see that he was convicted so early in the film. For some reason, I thought it would be a little bit later on, but it's just like, boom.
Well, he's the fugitive.
It's like, boom, murder, boom, conviction. Like, lethal injection, I believe is what he was sent. I mean,
sentenced to death by lethal injection. And the thing is, that's the whole premise of the film. So, like, they had to get the conviction out of the way.
Oh, they did.
To, like, try to lead to all the hijinks. Because the majority of this film is him running away from the cops, and specifically the U.S. Marshals, who are led by Tommy Lee Jones, who does just a fantastic job in this movie.
So let's talk a little bit about this escape, okay? So they're transporting, was it 4 or 5 different prisoners?
I think it's only 3 of them though, right?
There was Copeland, who was the black guy.
And in the bus.
In the green suit, and like his fit was nice. The green, like I gotta say,
he had a nice prisoner's transport fit.
Yeah, because Dr. Kimble had that yellow washed. It looks real bummy. But like the black guy Copeland had on this green fit. It fit like it actually was fitted to his body. He looked a little muscular in it. He was ready to maybe go on Squid Games perhaps. Outfit. I mean, it just I really liked his outfit. But anyway, so it was it 3 or 4 of them? Let's say it was 3 of them.
I only remember him, Copeland, and like
this other white
Latino guy, I think.
Was he Latino?
Whatever he was, he got murdered pretty quickly. But I feel like it was 3 of them.
Okay. And then there was the driver of the vehicle. Then you had another black CO and then another white CO with the stash.
Yeah, who was also Richard Reel, who has played Milton in Office Space.
Oh, yeah, that's right. He did.
And this is probably a good time to mention that I noticed a number of like random cameo appearances in this movie because I knew that this was a Harrison Ford film. I knew that Tommy Lee Jones was in it. But there were a few people in this movie that just popped up, and I was like, "Oh,
same."
Like I wasn't expecting Jane Lynch.
Yeah, that blew me away. So young in this film.
This is 1993. This is before we knew Jane Lynch's name.
She plays a doctor.
She plays like a pretty decent part with like a few lines.
Yeah.
Julianne Moore is in this movie.
She also was working in the hospital.
Which is like what? I expected her to play actually a bigger part.
Exactly.
In the film, but like she was in like 2 scenes, and it was just like that's it. Julianne Moore, thanks for your time. Also, Neil Flynn, who plays the janitor on Scrubs, was in this movie.
Who was he?
He was like a cop or like a... He was like a correctional officer or something.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, Neil Flynn is in this movie. And then obviously, as I mentioned before, Milton from Office Space with the red stapler.
That's awesome.
He also plays in this film, and he's a very incompetent jailhouse corrections officer.
Yeah, he's a CO.
Yeah.
But yeah, so basically,
but he's supposed to be transporting them.
It's supposed to be. So first of all, the whole transporting thing was very odd to me. So you have these 3 prisoners in the back of this bus, and like their hands are shackled, their feet are shackled, but they're not actually shackled to anything in the bus. And they're not shackled to each other. Which, when you're transporting prisoners, that's typically what's done, so that in an event like this, they can't just all run in different directions and run away. Typically, they should be shackled together.
It was very like 1920s.
I was like, there's
chain gang, yeah.
It was just very. I was like, okay, so they're all just individually like shackled to themselves and not shackled to anything in the bus. So they're all freely moving about. And then at some point, one of the guys pretends to have a seizure. So he's like,
but he's foaming from the mouth.
Yeah, but you saw him like he looked around where it was like it's clear he's putting this act on, but it's also like, how is he doing this?
Yeah, I was wondering. That was not made clear.
I was like, how is he actually foaming? But he's foaming at the mouth. They're like, stop, he needs help. So of course one of the COs opens the gate, goes back there, and he lunges at him. He has like a shiv in the bottom of his. It was like a toothbrush or something that he like, sharpened up, stabs the guy in the gut, and then next thing you know, like. It's just it's a hot mess. One of the cops gets a shotgun, and he's blasting away. He goes to shoot, and one of the inmates runs at him. So, of course, the shotgun gets moved up. He ends up shooting the driver and blasts a hole right through the top of his head. So now the bus is just like going on. Right. Just, the driving like crazy. It's mayhem. They're bouncing around. The car crashes, and then, of course, now when the car stops or the bus stops, they are on a train track. and you hear the distant sound of the train coming, and
gotta make a move.
It's like, we gotta go. So of course, Kimble, although he's in jail, he's still a good guy, right? He's also a doctor, so he feels bad for this CEO who's been wounded, and he's like, someone help with this man. And they're all like, you're on your own, doc. And they don't just run out and leave him.
Yeah, my man Milton was not with it.
Yeah.
My man Milton was like, yo, I'm trying to save myself. And he dips. Can we talk about Richard Kimble for a second? Because I feel like you talk about him trying to be a good guy. And I feel like there are multiple times throughout this film where he, like, puts himself at a disadvantage for the sole purpose of trying to be the good guy. And I don't know if this was like the screenwriters were trying to like hammer home the fact that this was a good person.
And also the fact that he's a doctor and he's a duty, right?
Right.
They take that.
The Hippocratic oath.
They take that oath that, do no harm.
Right. I feel like this is a guy that's been accused of murdering his wife. He protests his own innocence, and yet, maybe not yet, but he often puts himself in a position throughout the course of this film where he's like putting himself at a disadvantage for the sole purpose of trying to help others. So it felt very intentional to me, like they were very much trying to make sure that the audience saw that this was a good person.
Yes.
And even when it was at his own disadvantage, he was still trying to do good.
And he did. He saved that CEO's life. He pushed him out of the train and got out. I don't know how he carried that dead weight of that man through that side, but he got out.
Yeah, so basically he like picked this dead guy. Well, not dead. He wasn't dead. He picked this shot CO up after his partner had abandoned him. And he basically like takes him out of a broken window.
Yeah, he like pushes him out the window.
To push him out of the bus before the train comes and crushes the bus, basically. And this is around the time where we get introduced to U.S. Marshal Sam Gerard,
Tommy Lee,
who is played by Tommy Lee Jones, and he just takes over, kind of. Not only just the investigation, but kind of the movie.
The movie, you gotta love him. Like, he's just a real like take charge type of guy. He came in because honestly, like, the sheriff's department wasn't doing anything. Like, they were like, oh, they interviewed the CEO, and he's like, oh yeah, they're all dead. He's like, oh, they didn't escape? No, they're all dead. He's like, oh, okay, I guess case is closed. And then Tommy Lee shows up, and his guys basically finds, like, the leg shackles in the back, and they're like, well, we see these empty shackles.
Quickly, too.
Yeah.
Very quickly, which means, like, what were the Illinois PD doing up to this point?
Nothing.
Chicago PD. They were not really, like, were they even looking? Because the U.S. Marshals show up, and they find this evidence within, like, 10 minutes. So It's like, bro, like, y'all weren't even trying. Like, y'all were just trying to close this case.
And it's like, do you clear to revise your statement? And the CEO's like, oh, well, Kimble might have gotten away. It's like, come on, man. And then he's like, oh yeah, I saved my partner. I couldn't leave him there. He would have done the same for me. And it's like, this guy clearly is full of it, and everybody knows. So that was kind of interesting. But yeah, from the very beginning, basically, Tommy's character comes in and he's like, we got to find this guy. And he means business. I kind of want to jump ahead just a little bit. So like, there's a scene where basically they're able to narrow down where Harrison Ford character is, and he's running through the tunnels. He goes down to like this sewer. He's running around. Tommy Lee's character kind of has him cornered, and he's like basically at the top of this huge dam. It might as well be the Hoover Dam, how big this thing was. And he's staying on top of it, and basically he's like, you have nowhere to go. And then Harrison Ford just like looks at him and turns over and like jumps off the side into this water.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And you see him dive, and you're like, okay, like in real life, nobody would survive that, but it's a movie, so we know he's still alive. So the rest of the cops see this, and they're like, oh, like this guy, like he's dead, like that's it. But Tommy Lee character is like, no, like he's probably still alive, and I'm not gonna rest till I find his body. Which is like, this guy is about his business. He's gonna do his job, and at the end of the day, there's actually a funny quote about that. Like, I think one of the guys says something like, oh, the guy is fish food. He's like, come on, it's over. And then Tommy Lee says to the guy, well, go ahead and get a pole and catch you the fish that ate him. Because basically, like, I believe he's still out there.
Right.
So he was not going to stop until he actually
Tommy Lee Jones was giving jokes and, like, lines the whole movie.
Yeah.
And I actually want to correct the fact that I said that Richard Reel, who was in this movie, I said that he played Milton in Office Space. He was not Milton. He was Tom, the dude who ends up getting like handicapped, and he's in the wheelchair, and he comes up with that jump to conclusions board.
Oh yeah.
So
Okay.
he played Tom in Office Space, not Milton. Milton was a different guy. That's the guy that was in Barry.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So different guy, but there was an Office Space actor in this movie. I mean, I feel like, Tommy Lee Jones had all the best quotes in this movie for me. I love the part where he's like chasing Harrison Ford in that sewer tunnel, and Harrison Ford gets the gun, and he's able to kind of like hold him up, and he's like, "I didn't kill my wife."
I didn't kill my wife. I don't care.
Like, I don't care whether or not you're guilty. My job is to catch you.
Exactly.
And that really just like sets the tone for the character for the rest of the film. And he was just really fun to watch. Like, you're still rooting for Harrison Ford because that's how the movie's set up. And you know that he's innocent. And you want to help him figure out, well, not help him because you're just watching, but you want him to figure out who actually killed his wife.
Yeah.
You want vengeance to be served. But at the same time, you still kind of feel like, you
like the chase.
Yeah, like you're enjoying watching Tommy Lee Jones. And I think the interesting thing about this movie is that it is a chase film, but the cops are chasing this guy. But the guy that they're chasing is also chasing someone else.
Exactly.
So it's like a chase of a chase. And I think that's also what makes this movie so interesting and so iconic.
Well, yeah, because if you think about it, after he escapes, for a while there, the cops are all trying to figure out, where would he go? Where is he? And they quickly realize that he's actually still in Chicago. And they're like, why would he be here when he knows this is where we're looking for him? But at the end of the day, it's like, he knows he's innocent, and he needs to figure out who it was that killed his wife. And he kept saying from the very beginning, it was this one-armed man. He had some kind of prosthetic arm. And this kind of goes into the segment where we always talk about, maybe not what didn't age well, but like what wouldn't be practical in today's day. And for me, it was the amount of times he went to this hospital and was just opening doors, getting medication out, getting access to needles. And it's like, none of this stuff is locked up. Like, he's walking through the prosthetic wing. He's not wearing a lab coat. Every other person in that room was wearing a lab coat. He's just browsing through, like, walking. No one stops him and says, "Hey, what are you doing back here?" He's back in the employee.
1993, baby.
He's back in the employee's male locker room, stealing someone's ID badge. Like, no one's asking this man, "Why are you here? Like, how'd you get back here?" So that was all very like, okay, this would never happen in today's days. But it's a movie, so you kind of suspend your disbelief, and you're like, all right, I get it. But that hospital had very lax security until Julianne Moore stepped in and was like, "Hey, get this guy out of here."
And she also didn't do a great job, right? Like, Julianne Moore,
took his badge.
She did what she could. She took his badge. She said, "Hey, you wait right here. I'm going to get some security."
Right.
And then he was like, "I'm not going to wait right here. I'm going to leave because you're getting security." She's like, "Wait, hey, where did he go?
Hey, what's the big idea?"
Yeah, there was a few moments like that where they were chasing this man because he's a fugitive. That's the premise of the film. So majority of the movie is him like running away from people who are trying to catch him or people who are trying to figure out who he is. There was one that was particularly egregious to me if we're talking about moments that didn't age well. And a part of me was thinking, like, why is this happening? So he goes to, I think it was when he went to go see one of the prisoners that he thinks is responsible for killing.
Yes.
And it ends up being a different person that's not the person that killed his wife.
Mm-hmm.
And so he says, "Okay, I'm going to leave." And as he's trying to leave the courthouse where the prison is held, he's trying to leave the courthouse, and Tommy Lee Jones spots him. And he's like, "Hey, Richard!" And then he looks up and like, "Oh my God!" And then he's like running down the steps trying to catch him. And I was thinking to myself, this is a U.S. Marshal. He got the building surrounded with support.
Yeah.
He's there with a whole team of people. Why is he chasing this guy down the stairs? Why doesn't he just tell somebody like, "Hey, he's coming down the stairs. Grab him.
Grab him at the front door." Yeah.
And the only thought that I had that would have made any sense at all is the fact that it's 1993 and nobody has a cell phone.
They still had talkies.
I guess. Did they use talkies in the movie?
I don't remember them using, but I would think that cops would have radios. They would have.
I mean, I think the thing is that like he's in a courthouse, not expecting to run into Kimble, and he sees him. It's not like he was like on a mission where he would have had a walkie-talkie in general. But I just thought it was funny because it felt like you are a U.S. Marshal. You're trying to find this high-profile fugitive, and the only solution was to like let me catch him trying to run down these steps. And then he didn't catch him.
Because Harrison tells the cops, he's like, hey, there's a man back there waving a gun and like whatever.
Right.
So the cops
there's a
grab
crazy
him.
guy. He's over there. And then they like put the building on lockdown, but Harrison Ford's able to escape before the lockdown is enacted. And he's like, wait, no, that was my guy.
And then he's shooting at the
He's
the
shooting
glass.
at the wall. This is another thing was like, why is he was a really terrible shooter because he missed a number of times. Harrison Ford's foot is stuck in the door. He didn't shoot his foot once. He just kept shooting the glass. It was a little baffling.
And it's like, you can't shoot through the glass. Like, you can't, which is why the glass is there. So
man, I missed him 7 times.
So that was actually, it's another thing about aging, not aging
That felt bizarre, especially because they presented him throughout the film as like this highly competent police officer.
Yeah, absolutely. But then you also have the whole Superman effects, right? Because you have Dr. Kimble, and the first time we see him, he's like real gruffy, full beard. His hair is like a dark, dirty brown, I suppose.
Right.
And now he ends up going to dye his hair. You see him in the bathroom, he dyes his hair black. And I was kind of chuckling to myself. The box he was using, it was like some kind of like black man's hair thing. And he like dyes his head black and then he shaves himself. So now he's like completely clean faced. And he's walking around the hospital and you have a cop who's holding like a wanted poster with his picture on it. And the cop walks right by him and does not realize that it's him. And in my head, I'm like, oh, Superman effect. Because
it's the worst cop ever also.
Because he has no facial hair. Obviously, it's not the same guy. And no one could really... But to be fair, I will say, after he shaved, I feel like it added like 15 years to his life. Like, he looked so much younger, so much cleaner, without that bushy beard on his face. So, I will say, good look on shaving. Because he looked a lot different. A lot better.
We know that white people don't age the same as us. So, I mean there's something to that.
They actually had something that I like to call a sex to death montage. Did you catch that?
No, I don't think I caught the sex to death.
So there's a scene. So after he jumps off of the huge dam, he's in the water. He gets out. He's wearing the sweater. You can tell he's freezing because, of course, it's wet. It's cold outside, and he's like basically in and out of sleep. And he's having these flashbacks of his wife. Their great relationship. There's, these scenes where he's remembered like holding her and they're in bed together and they're, having all types of fun. And there's a scene where like it goes from like he's making out with her, they're kissing all passionately. And then it flashes to basically when she's dying in his arms and he's giving her CPR. And there's like blood everywhere. And so I was like, ooh, like they went from making out to CPR. And it was like a nice... I
don't think I noticed
You didn't notice that? And I was like, oh, a nice little sex to death montage. So I'm going to start looking for that in movies
The
now.
classic sex to death montage. Happens in every movie.
There was no kitchen scene. There was no running through the kitchen. I was looking for it. But throughout this movie, I did not see not one scene where he ran through the kitchen. So,
But this is definitely still a chase movie.
It is.
There's just a lot of chasing. It's a lot of like running after the guy. But yeah, I don't think they were ever in a space where they ran through a kitchen, which is a little surprising, actually.
Yeah, it was mostly outdoors. Although I will say, so there's one scene where he's running and he comes up on this St. Patrick's Day parade. And of course, like to elude the police, he like dons one of those green caps and he was wearing this coat and he loses the coat. But in my head, I'm like, where did the coat go? Because you see him...
He just throws it on the ground.
But it's not on the ground. So like, if you look at it, Tommy Lee was like maybe 3 or 4 people behind him. It was a very small crowd and he sees him coming and he's like, oh man. So he like takes off the coat and then he like just leaves the parade. And I'm like, where's his coat?
Is there any part of this movie that you would say was like your favorite scene?
I found the escape scene pretty funny just because it was like completely like not plausible. But probably when he at the end when he finally is able to face his quote unquote friend, when he realizes his friend is actually the one who had set him up the whole time.
Was my man's name?
I forgot his name. But basically, the whole movie, the cops have been interviewing this one guy, and he's like, "Look, this is my man. If you want me to help you get him, it's not going to happen." He offers to give him money. Like, I mean, from the very beginning, this guy has very clearly been on Dr. Kimble's side. He's like, "I think he's guilty. I don't think he killed his wife." But it turns out that his friend basically was out to get him because his friend was partnering with, I think the guy's name was like Devlin McGregor, and there was some
Devlin McGregor is the name of the pharmaceutical company.
Okay, yeah. So there was this new drug they were trying to come out called like RDU90 or something.
Dr. Nichols was his name.
Dr. Nichols. So they had this drug that was supposed to be able to reduce the risk of like heart disease in patients, but instead it ends up causing severe liver damage. And Dr. Kimble finds out the drug is really not doing what it's supposed to. And so they're like, we got to get this guy up out of here. So I think the initial plan may have been they were trying to kill him, but when they got to the house, he wasn't there. So they're like, well, let's just kill his wife and frame him.
Yeah, which also this doesn't make great sense.
No.
So the whole idea behind this movie is like this surgeon recognizes that this medicine is not doing its intended duty.
Right.
And it's actually, instead of helping people, it's actually causing liver damage. And so what they were doing was whenever they had samples of people that had used the product, they were replacing it with samples of a healthy liver.
Right.
And they were actually just repeating samples from the same healthy liver anytime that they were sending samples in.
And they're like, oh, look, this thing is great. It's magic. Magic medicine.
So Dr. Nichols, who was supposed to be Harrison Ford's mans, like this is his mans, like this is the guy that he's calling up while he's on the lam.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, yo, bro, this is what I'm on.
He offered to help and have him stay with him.
And like, yeah, like they were friends. He lent him money. Dr. Nichols was not cooperating with the police. Like, yo, y'all not gonna find my boy. So the whole time you're thinking like, oh, like this is his ally. But the whole time, he's actually the one that is creating the mayhem because he is doctoring all of the. Well, I don't mean it. Yeah, I didn't mean it to be a pun, but he's doctoring all the records that are being sent out about the effectiveness of this medicine. So although that it's causing liver damage to patients and actually causing them to go to the hospital.
Exactly.
He's actually like, oh yeah, like we're trying to get this bread. So yeah, it's
the whole
crazy.
thing is messy. Just like Martin Medicine.
Yeah, I mean, this was not a twist that I saw coming. I wasn't expecting this to be a movie with a twist.
So, I don't know if you...
So the one-armed man, just to go back, the one-armed man is supposedly like a security guard / hitman for this pharmaceutical company. And so Dr. Nichols hires him.
His name was like Bones or something. And I kind of was like... I was like, what? Why do they have a hitman? Like, why does the doctor have a hitman? Like, the whole thing was just so bizarre. I was like, what is happening here? But they get him to come and take him out. And he tried. But when they're fighting, Harrison Ford, I mean, he did a number on that man's arm. When they were fighting and they started tossing around on the stairs.
But what I don't understand is, so this man comes in your house. He kills your wife. You catch him. Y'all get in the whole fight. You throw him down the stairs, and then he just dips, and then like he's just like, oh, I guess he's out, and then he's like, let me try to save my wife's life. He tries to give his wife CPR, but she still dies. But then it's like, this man just left.
I mean, what are you gonna do?
Yeah,
I mean, yes, you're trying to chase him, but then it's like if you think she might be dying and you could possibly save her, and you're a doctor,
you're gonna try to save her before you try to chase the man. Yeah, that's true.
I mean, cops do it all the time. Like, someone will shoot the partner, and then the guy will get away because the cop will go back and make sure their partner's okay.
Yeah, that's
real. So that made sense to me. But what I'm not sure you know is that this movie was actually loosely based on an actual person. Did you know that?
No, I did not know that.
So the name of the actual guy is Samuel Holmes Shepard. He was a doctor, and he was convicted of the murder of his pregnant wife back in 1954. He served about 10 years in jail before his conviction was overturned on appeal in 66. It was overturned because they said that there basically was insufficient evidence initially to have him convicted. So they were like, yeah, he didn't actually do this. There was no talk of a one-armed man in the real case.
Wait, so what happened?
So basically his wife was murdered at home.
Okay.
While I believe he said he was like asleep on the daybed downstairs. I didn't read the whole case, but he was like downstairs and like he heard a noise or something. And by the time he woke up and went up there, his wife was dead. They never actually found who did it. But long story short, the cops basically honed in and was like, yeah, this is the guy. You know how they...
Of course.
This is the guy, didn't look at anybody else. And basically, he got convicted, served 10 years, kept appealing. And then on appeal, basically the new jury was like, yeah, there wasn't enough evidence for us to say beyond a reasonable doubt that this guy did this. They were like, this is not it.
I feel like that was one of my biggest takeaways from watching The Wire, of just like seeing how a police unit, specifically a murder unit, operates. Of just like, yo, like, especially if you're working in the big city, we're getting murders reported to our office
all the
constantly.
time.
And like, all we want to do is be able to close
the case. Yeah.
So it's like, even if we don't have great evidence, if we have enough to convict somebody, it's a win. And I don't think I ever thought about murder in that terms before I watched The Wire. But just like seeing like how many unsolved murders there are, and obviously like they feel like, yo, if we don't close some of these, then we're like an incompetent police force.
Exactly.
So they want to be able to close as many as they can, even if it's 20%, to be able to say like, yo, we were able to like close these cases. And so murder is one of those things where it's like, it's really bad for them to be able to not find the person who did it. So if they find somebody that seems like they might be, then it's just like, yo, like we're closing this case.
And then
like,
also it's like, it's for the public too, right? To be like, oh, we're doing our job. We found the person. You guys are now safe.
Yeah, you don't want the public to feel like the murderer is still out there.
Right. So it's like, oh, you guys are safe. We did what we had to do. But honestly, like, I know this is kind of going over the left field, but not really, because he was convicted of lethal. Well, he was sentenced.
Oh, no, he was going to get murdered.
Because in my head, I was just like, this is why a part of me is like very much like anti-death penalty for that very reason. Because it's like, you find this person guilty of this crime or these crimes, and then it's like, oh, this person, like, yeah, we got to kill him. We got to fry him, because for some reason we love to do that.
We got to fry him.
Like, I
also think about how many people have been on like death row for 25 years, and then it gets found out, they're like, oh, absolutely, they actually didn't do this.
And that's the problem.
And it's like, wait, what would have happened if we just would have killed this guy?
They would have just been dead.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm like, I'm not a fan of it, because I'm like, there's too many variables. It's like, I feel very uncomfortable, even with the confession, because we all know confessions can be fake as well. But I kind of want to go back for a second. So talking about the real guy, it's actually a really interesting story. So after the appeal gets overruled, he gets out. He actually becomes a pro wrestler for a little bit.
Wait, who?
The real doctor.
Oh, wow.
Dr. Shepard becomes a pro wrestler, and his name is Killer, which I don't think that was...
it could have been a little bit more creative, but okay.
But what he did was he used like his knowledge in like medicine and biology and all that to develop this new submissive hold, and it was called the mandibular nerve pinch. It later became known...
Also, he needed a better name, but okay.
It later became known as the mandibular claw used by mankind.
The mandible claw, yeah.
And that's basically...
Mr. Sacco.
Yes.
Sacco! Mr. Sacco! And the mandible claw! Oh, no!
You place your middle and your ring finger into the opponent's mouth, and then you, like, press down on, like, the soft part of the skin under the tongue.
Yeah.
And you, like, clawed it. Yeah. So, like, that move was originated from that doctor.
Oh, my God! Oh, my God! He's pulling out the sock! It's happening!
I thought that was so interesting. So he does wrestling for a little bit.
Wait a second. So you're telling me the guy that The Fugitive's based on basically invented the Mr. Sacco finisher?
Yes.
That's bizarre.
Minus the socks, but yes.
That's his like peak 90s trivia right here.
Yeah. I mean, it gets.
You heard it here first, folks.
His story's not over. So he does that, and then he ends up practicing medicine for a little bit after that. He goes back and he's like, yeah, I miss saving people's lives and all that. But turns out he was an alcoholic. So there were a number of wrongful death claims that were made against him because
can't win them all
because his patients were dying, and so it actually ended up that he ended up dying. I believe it was just 4 years after his release from prison due to liver failure from alcoholism.
Okay, well, that's sad.
So the reason why I wanted to bring that up is like you were talking about how like in the movie. They had a thing about the livers, about how the medication was basically damaging people's liver. Yes. It's in my head, I was like, oh, he died of liver failure. I mean, not to say it in a happy voice, but he died of liver failure, and that was also, like, in the movie. I just thought that was kind of...
So did he die after the movie or before the movie?
No, he died in 1970.
Oh,
so it's very possible that they knew that, and they drew that parallel in the film.
Into the script.
But I was like, oh, this real guy, like, this is a movie. Like, I'd watch the real story.
What's his name?
His name was Samuel Holmes Shepard.
Oh, that's interesting. Because they named the Tommy Lee Jones character was named as Sam.
Yes.
Not Shepard, but
yeah.
Maybe that had something to do with it.
So he was a neurosurgeon who went to jail, who came out and became a wrestler. He practiced, killed some people, and then died.
I mean, it's interesting that you bring up him being a wrestler because one of the notes that I took when I was watching this movie was like, how are these doctors such good fighters? Like, these are supposed to be, like, surgeons, and they're, like, kicking major ass. There's a part of the movie where Harrison Ford's character, who's, Dr. Richard Kimble, is on a subway with a hitman, with an actual, this guy murders people. This is the guy that murdered his wife, has a gun, and somehow he's able to hit the emergency brake, wrestle the gun away, and handcuff the hitman.
But you gotta think about adrenaline, right?
And he kicks his ass. Like, he's like fighting this dude.
Those endorphins.
He wrestles the gun away. I'm like, how is he able to do this? And then towards the end of the movie, where, he's fighting with Dr. What's his name?
The friend?
His alleged friend, who ends up being a turncoat, Dr. Nichols.
Right.
The good guy turned bad guy. I mean, this guy is just like, he's hiding behind walls. He's hitting him in the head with chairs. He has lead pipes. He's doing all this stuff. He knows how to wield a gun.
He was getting ready.
I thought these guys were surgeons, but they're the best fighters in the movie. They're better than
That's true, because the cops just shoot.
They're better than the cops. They're better than the actual hitmen. The best fighters in the whole movie are two surgeons. What's that about? But now I know that surgeons become professional wrestlers. Yes. So now it makes perfect sense.
Yes. That's what happened.
What were your favorite quotes from this movie?
I mean, we kind of touched on a few. You touched on the quote that Tommy Lee did when he's like, I don't care. I thought that was hilarious.
I don't care.
But it also made a bunch of sense because it's like, I'm a U.S. Marshal. Like, my job is to bring you in. And that's it. I don't care what you did, what you didn't do, what you like, I don't care. Just come in. We'll clear all that up later. Although, well, maybe I'll get into that later. As far as quotes, there was some there was one part that I found to be very odd. So this is after Harrison Ford breaks out. He is walking the streets, and we know he's trying to get back to Chicago because he's trying to figure out, who's this guy who killed my wife. So he's walking down the street, and out of nowhere, this car pulls over, and it's this woman, and she pulls over. I don't know if you caught this. What was this side of the road? And she's like, "Hey, you need a ride?" And I was like, "Is she trying to solicit him?"
Oh wow!
It was very bizarre because it was because I was like, as a woman, there's no way I'm pulling over the side of the road to ask if a man wants a ride.
I mean,
unless
you're trying to give him a ride.
I mean, that's what it seemed like to me. And he was kind of like, "All right, I got to get where I'm going." So I thought that was kind of funny because it was very suggestive the way.
He gets picked up.
Yeah, but it was very suggestive. I was like, why is she doing this? That was kind of weird. Just there was one part where he's in the tunnel. This is after he steals an ambulance, by the way. He's driving through the city, and then he gets cornered in this tunnel. So he has to like abandon the ambulance and run through the tunnel to get away from them. And he's running. And of course there's traffic, so there's cars that are, stopped up. And this one guy's driving a car. He gets out the car and he's like, "What the hell's going on out here?" And then Tommy Lee turns to the guy and he's like, "Get back in your car, sir." And the guy's like, "Oh, okay." Because if Tommy Lee loves you to do something, you're going to do it, because he was like not messing around.
Tommy Lee's the best. Tommy Lee, honestly, all my favorite quotes in the movie are Tommy Lee quotes. I already talked about the "I don't care" part.
Yeah, that was classic.
There was also a part where they are going to try to find Dr. Kimble, because they get a tip that he's like shacked up with this girl. This is after he gets picked up by the when he's what's it called, hitchhiking.
Yes.
He gets picked up, and they get a tip that like, oh, he's shacked up with this girl. If you go to this woman's house, you'll find him. And when they go there, they end up finding one of the guys, Copeland, who escaped the prison bus with Kimble, but it's not Kimble. And his girlfriend's there. She's screaming. She's going nuts. He grabs one of the U.S. Marshals. He tries to hold them up and says, like, if you don't let me go, I'm going to blow his brains out.
Wait, are you going to talk about the girlfriend or talk about that part? Because that part was crazy.
I'm actually going to talk about Tommy Lee, because these are all my quotes. But
crazy.
Long story short, he ends up killing the guy, saving his partner, and the girlfriend is just screaming. And then he just turns around and looks at her and goes, "Oh, shut up." And then he kills her boyfriend in her apartment. He's telling her to shut up.
I was like, come on, bro.
Which was hilarious to me. Tommy Lee Jones is just like, it wasn't just what he said, it was the way he said it. Like, he had like a certain swag in this movie that I don't remember. Like, I always see Tommy Lee Jones as like this 70-year-old. Like, I feel like he's been like this old man for most of my life. And he's not young in The Fugitive, but he has a youngness to his character. He has a certain just attitude that he brings to the film that you're like looking forward to all of the scenes that he's in.
Yeah, because he's very confident, knows what he's doing, and even when he's wrong, he doesn't even really admit that he's wrong. Like, there's a whole scene where they're trying to figure out where Kimble is calling from. He calls from this payphone, and they can hear in the background like a train. And so a lot of the they're all like, "Wait, that sounds like an L train, like an elevated train." And he's like, "Oh yeah, because you tell the difference between an elevated train and a regular subway." And they're like, "No, I'm telling you, it's an elevated train." As they listen closely, they are able to hone in on the train conductor's voice, and he says the next stop, and he names the stop. And based on the stop, they're like, "Oh yeah, that's the elevated train, blah 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 blah," on that stop. So they're getting ready to walk out, and he's like, "See, guys, I knew it was the elevated train." And it's like, bro, you just said you couldn't tell the difference, but now all of a sudden you knew it was the elevated train. But like, it was funny, everybody laughed, and it's just kind of like, yeah, like, I'm not gonna say that I was wrong, but like, I'm the man.
He's definitely on his like, I'm the man. Another favorite quote. And again, this is not so much the quoted stuff, but the way that he quoted it. But this is after they figure out that Dr. Nichols is not on the up and up. And they figure out that he does know the guy, the hitman, the one-armed man that Dr. Kimble's house he went to. And they're starting to put the pieces together. And Tommy Lee Jones says, "Dr. Nichols lied to me. Go find him." I just loved that. It was just the way he said it. It was just like, it seems like it's such a simple line to put in your script. But sometimes, when you have an actor that just brings a character to life, it's like they make the line better than the line is on paper.
Yeah.
And I feel like the way that he delivered certain lines, and that line just stood out. I was like, "Dr. Nichols lied to me. Go find him." Like, yo, like, I need this man. Like, I need my comeuppance. And I feel like it goes to your point of like, yo, like, he felt so much in control of everything that it's like, yo, I'm not gonna let this man just lie to me and get off with it. Like, I need to be able to do what I need to do. And that's the same way that he approached the whole relationship with Dr. Kimble. Is like, this guy might be innocent, this guy might be guilty, but at the end of the day, I have a job to do.
He's very smart about the way he did it, too, because he's thinking, like, why would he come back to this area? What is he trying to do? And he realizes like, oh, he's probably trying to figure out this one-armed guy who he claimed killed his wife. Like, maybe there's something to it. And so he does, in fact, take his team down to that prosthetic lab, and they're trying to figure out. They had something like 41 different hits of possible people who like got prosthetics in the area, but also had a criminal record. And he's trying to cross-reference that to figure out who could possibly be the killer. So he wasn't completely closed-minded in the sense that he automatically believed this guy should be in jail. It's kind of like, all right, well, let's see what he's trying to investigate. And also, why would he do that? So maybe he isn't exactly guilty. So I think that was a nice look as far as him, like, keeping an open mind as to, like, possibly this guy didn't actually do it. And if not, then who did? So I was like, okay, he's doing some police work here. He's not just...
Yeah, he was definitely doing police work. Well, let me ask you this. What do you think was the theme of The Fugitive? Or what do you think was the message that they were trying to get across?
I think there might have been a couple of different ones.
Okay.
I mean, the most obvious one, I guess I could say, was people being wrongfully convicted, right? We see it all the time. So it's the idea of cops just honing in on one suspect, and they believe like, oh, it's always the boyfriend or it's always the husband. Therefore, this is who has to do it. And so I think it's the idea of
whatever makes the most sense.
Well, yeah, you gotta close the case out.
And we're able to convict, then that's the person that we're just going to
do it. So like
guilty,
we know,
right?
we already know like that the justice system is not the best. So
the injustice system.
I mean, yeah, it's like the incompetency of like sometimes the investigation and like the injustice of the legal system. This is what happens. People get wrongfully imprisoned all the time. It just so happened that, in this case, it's a white man who is a good guy, right? So we can root for him.
Good man, real good man.
So it's that idea of like, well, he's a good guy. We can root for him. So like, yeah, you definitely shouldn't be in jail. But of course, that message gets a lot more muddied if you're not that good of a guy, right? So like maybe you didn't commit the crime, but you have a history of drug abuse or a history of...
Or you have a record of petty crime.
Right. And then that's kind of like, well, you did do this, so... But it's like, yeah, but
that has nothing to do.
This has nothing to do with him murdering his wife in cold blood. So I think they needed, the clean, good doctor trying to save lives to paint that picture that the legal system may not always be fair.
Well, you talk about the legal system, and I think for me, one of my big themes that I took away was about Big Pharma, which is interesting because I feel like Big Pharma wasn't even a phrase that we used in the 90s.
I know.
Certainly, I wasn't using it at 8 years old. But I feel like that was one of the themes that I took away from this was like this idea that these pharmaceutical companies are only concerned about making money, even though they are in the healthcare business. They're more concerned with selling products than they are with actually improving people's health. And in fact, are selling products that are detrimental to people's health. And I feel like that's something that's come up a lot over the course of the past 5 to 10 years. There's been a lot of documentaries about different pharmaceutical companies. There's been a lot of films that have been on Netflix and Hulu. And I feel like that's been a major thing. This is a particularly American problem, especially.
Yes, exactly.
Of just like trying to sell products and make money at the expense of the actual patient health. So I think like that was one of the big themes of just like Big Pharma only cares about making money. But I think the other part of it was this idea of like seizing the opportunity, right? This is an innocent man who was getting ready to go to prison for the rest of his life until he received the death penalty. And he had an opportunity, an opportunity that he did not create, but he was able to escape a prison bus that was taking him away. And not only escape, but also like try to find opportunities to find the person who actually did the crime. And I feel like that was like the big theme the initial theme that I took away from this movie is like, if you have an opportunity, you should take advantage of it. You should always seize the moment because you never know if and when you'll get that opportunity again.
Oh, this is very 8 Mile. You only get one shot.
Exactly. Knees weak, palms are sweaty. There's vomit on the sweater already. Mom's spaghetti. spaghetti, spaghetti. But I feel like that was definitely a big part of it because even the way that he like utilized his relationships with different people that he knew throughout the medical world, and he was able to use his knowledge of the computer systems to be able to like figure out who these people were. So it's like, yo, like I have a chance to do something, to figure something out. Yeah, I could try to escape and go run away to Utah or something, but like, nah, I'm going back to Chicago. I'm going to figure out who killed my wife. I'm going to prove my own innocence so that I don't have to keep running.
Yeah.
And like he had an opportunity and he took advantage of it.
Oh, kudos to Dr. Kimble.
Yeah, shout out to him.
Do you have any last things to discuss? Oh, I want to make one correction. So before I had said that the real doctor had done the wrestling and then the medicine, it was actually reversed. He practiced medicine for a little bit and then he did the wrestling.
He became a wrestler. That's actually crazier.
And then became wrestler.
Well, I think the last thing for us to do is figure out how many rewinds we want to give this film out of 10, out of 5. So what we do is say, 1 to 5. How many rewinds should this movie receive? Of course, 1 meaning I would never want to watch this movie ever again. 5 meaning this has unlimited rewatch value. Anytime you see this movie, you want to watch it over and over again.
All right. I feel like I always go first. I'm going to let you go first.
Okay. I'm a little stuck between like a 4 and a 5.
Okay.
I think I'm going to say 4.5 rewinds. Like, I feel like this is like a really good 90s action movie. Like, this is like a top tier. Like, I feel like Tommy Lee Jones adds a lot to this film. I don't know how much. I don't know if I would like this movie as much if there was a different person playing the role of Sam Gerard. But Tommy Lee Jones playing this role, because what I mean by that is, obviously the main character is Harrison Ford, and Harrison Ford is the good guy, and Harrison Ford's the person that you're rooting for. And it's very easy when a cop is trying to catch the main character to just like root against the cops.
Of course.
But I didn't find myself doing that as I was watching this movie. I felt like I was like, yeah, I kind of get it. Like I'm kind of rooting for the bad guy, quote unquote bad guy, who is innocent, of course. So you're rooting for Harrison Ford, but you're also kind of rooting for Tommy Lee Jones at the same time. And I feel like what he added to the film just like kicks it up a notch, where it isn't just your typical cat and mouse action movie. Like it's him trying to catch a guy who's innocent, who's also kind of catch a guy who killed his wife. And
nice
I feel
twist.
like there's also like that big twist at the end where his confidant and his business partner ends up being the actual bad guy, which I did not see coming either. So yeah, for me, this is a good movie. I don't know how much rewatch value in general like action films have, so that's probably the only reason I'm not giving it a 5. But I do think this was a really fun movie to watch, and I feel like the 2 hours were just like right on time. Like just when you're getting on the verge of being too long, the movie ends. So you're not. I didn't feel like it was like too long. Maybe you did because it wasn't 90 minutes. But yeah, I'll give it a 4.5.
Okay, that's a very solid score. It's a very solid score. I'm gonna go a little lower than you and drop it to a 4.
Okay.
But I do agree. Yes, it was very fun. I did want to see where it was going. Tommy Lee Jones's character was a riot. When you said something about like not being sure how the movie would have turned out had that character been played by someone else, I was kind of like going through the catalog of actors in my mind, and I was like, what if his character was played by like Morgan Freeman?
Yeah, he could have pulled it off.
I feel like that could have worked.
Yeah.
I could see him saying those lines like, I don't care. Like I could see it. It would be different, but I could see it. But anyway, yeah, I definitely thought it was a lot of fun. 2 hours, it was a little rough for me towards the end. I was kind of like, it's still on. Like I enjoyed it, but I don't think I'd watch it again for a couple of years. So that's why I'm like, it's not a 5, because I definitely don't want to just, if it's on, I'm probably going to change the channel at this point because I just watched it. But, it was fun. I would recommend people watch it. had plenty of blow-ups and bombs, and they had the train crash where like big explosions happened, and the cops were not dumb. That's one thing I noticed. A lot of times you have these movies, well, except for the sheriff's office, but a lot of times you have these movies where the chases will happen and the cops will like
completely incompetent.
Like, they'll crash into each other and like all this. there was none of that. There were no car pileups during the chases, and they were able to figure out why he was in town and what he was doing. So I did like the fact that the cops were not complete imbeciles. They actually had some sense about them. So yeah, I'll say a 4. It was definitely a good watch. It was fun, and there were not a lot of things that aged poorly. Like there were things that like watching it, you were like, this is not reasonable or this wouldn't happen. But I wasn't offended by anything. There were no lines that I felt like they took it too far or, it didn't age well. So I think a solid 4.
That's fair. I mean, I definitely was giving a few pauses. I definitely give it a few rewinds where it was like, oh, wait, I wasn't really paying attention. Let me rewind it.
Right.
I understand what you mean by that 2 hours being a little lengthy. I don't know if that's necessarily like a blemish on the film itself or if it's a blemish on our attention span in 2023. Like it's a little different than it was 30 years ago when this movie initially came out. But enjoyable film. 4.5 for me, 4 for Andrene. This was my pick. So I think the next episode will be a movie that you will pick for the next episode of Rewind Rewatch.
Oh, before we close out, just wanted to let you all know that we would love to receive your emails. You can hit us up at rewindrewatch1990s@gmail.com.
Emails are good. Tweets are good as well. We are at, what is it? RR90s Pod. At RR90s Pod. If you check us out on Twitter or on Instagram, RR90s Pod is the screen name on either one.
Let us know what movies you'd like for us to cover and also what your thoughts are on The Fugitive or any of the movies we did before.
And if you agree or disagree with our Rewind Rewatch ratings, if you have a different rating, we'd love to hear them as well.
Yep, sounds good.
That's the end of this episode, and we will be back next week with a film that Andrene will be picking.
It will be awesome.
We will decide that when we meet again.
Later.